All right, welcome back to the Cherry Heat Check. I am Ricky Thompson. Today is May 8th when we're recording. We got Mother's Day weekend upon us. Buy your mom a card or some flowers. You still got time. Shouts out to my mom and my wife, the two best moms there could be. And also, a new pope was selected today. I don't know if I'm going to get my guest thoughts on that. I think he's a pretty holy man himself, but first American pope. So happy Pope Day. We're going to focus on Lobo basketball and Lobo sports here. We got two new commits came to Lobo basketball under Coach Olin this week. Also have some other news about just Lobo sports world. And then we're going to check out the roster at where it stands. I think there's 11 gentlemen currently committed or, signed officially under Coach Olin. Coach Olin was on the radio earlier today on 610 The Sports Animal, had a great interview there on the opening drive with Jeff Symbieta and JJ Buck. I highly suggest everyone check that out as well. But let's get into it here. The first thing I just wanted to hit on in Lobo Land, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt will have his own day today, May 8th, city of Montgomery, Alabama, where he is from. The Washington Commander running back now has his own day. That is pretty awesome. Hats off to him and continued success. Something I just saw here come in this afternoon, there will be a Lobo football camp for high school age prospects in Albuquerque. It's called the Jason Eck Football Camp. Looks like it's only a one-day camp for 9th through 12th graders. I did attend a Lobo football camp in my day. I think Rocky Long was the coach, but we actually stayed overnight and slept on the practice fields and had a multi-day ordeal where the skill players played 7-on-7 against other schools, and at night you would get in fights with the other teams because you're all camping on the same field. So this sounds a little different, maybe a little safer, but let's hope they get some prospects from Albuquerque in the state that are worth maybe offering. One thing I just wanted to note is brother of Drew Gordon, who sadly passed away, ex-player of the Lobos, Lobo great. His brother Aaron Gordon has been stepping up for his family in a big way recently. I believe Drew had 3 children. 2 of them have moved up to Denver with their mother to be with their uncle. And after the Game 1 press conference where their uncle Aaron made an incredible game winner, his second game winner of the playoffs, he brought them on the podium. Just really cool to see him stepping up for his family while being able to perform in such stressful situations of the playoffs, and seeing those kids up there, that's really cool. So prayers go out to their family, but that is cool to see, and let's hope the Nuggets can keep doing well. Former Lobo Daniel Thomas has headed out finally. He went out, but we didn't know where he was going. He's going to be at UNC Asheville. Never actually played in a game for the Lobos over this past season as a freshman from Texas. Seems like he could develop into a solid player, and we'll be keeping tabs on him as we roll along here. Coach Olin's staff did get an updated new member. Talia Garza was reported by Lobo Basketball Twitter, comes over as a director of basketball operations, was previously working at UC Santa Clara here in the Bay Area, where I reside. I think she was working under the women's program for a few years, but she also played college basketball, I believe, at UC Irvine. So good basketball experience. I'm sure Olin, Coach Tank, and staff are ready to unload some tasks for her, and she'll hit the ground running. So congrats and welcome. Just something quick. I saw looking out 2 years from now, there's a prospect named Lyrus Robinson out of Arizona, 2027 guard prospect who's been recruited by the likes of TCU, Missouri, Stanford, South Dakota, and now New Mexico. He's a 6'4" guard. Looks like he has a lot of potential, and we'll be looking forward to see if he becomes a Lobo 2 years from now. Who knows? As we hop into, I guess, the bigger news of the week, getting a big point guard, I'm going to bring in my guest, Joe from Ohio. I'm not going to ask you about the Pope, I promise. How are you, Joe? And what's going on today?
I'm good, Ricky. Thanks for having me, man. No, yeah, Pope Day. Congrats to the new Pope. Congrats to everyone who follows that stuff. So it was a good day for a lot of people around the world. Yeah, so interesting. You mentioned Lyrus Robinson, the son of ex Lobo coach Jerome Robinson, ex Lobo assistant coach. So he was on Paul Weir's staff. So there's some connection there with
I
Lyrus Robinson.
Well, that's why I have you on this show, Joe. You know way too much about basketball, and I want to thank you for coming on the last show. It got higher ratings than this show has ever gotten, and I think that's due to you. So we're gonna keep it moving here. We have a new Lobo point guard, Dayton Albury. We talked about him a lot last show. He's a 6'2" guard transferring over from Utah State. Also spent time, I believe, in junior college. But played at Queens in Charlotte before Utah State. At Queens, he averaged 17 points, almost 6 rebounds, over 3.5 assists. Last year, he kind of split time at that guard position with Drake Allen, but started the majority of the game, showed he's a really great downhill guard, averaged about 8 points and over 2.5 rebounds. Joe, I'm looking for him to be a leader on this team, but what specifically can you see him bringing in Coach Olin's system? And are you excited
Um,
about the signing?
Yeah, we touched on it last week. I think he's a underrated defender. You look at his usage rate on Bart Torvik and Ken Palm, and it wasn't very high at Utah State. When he was at Queens, however, it was significantly higher than what it was at Utah State, and he was actually pretty effective. He was pretty efficient. Granted, he was playing against much lower competition at Queens on a nightly basis than he is in the Mountain West. But I think he's like we touched on the last pod, very underrated defender. Uh, he has tremendous speed for a point guard position. I know he's listed at 6'3". I don't know if that's legit or not. He looks more 6'1", 6'2", but if he's 6'3", that's a big point guard, and that's ideal for any coach's system. Now, what's interesting about Dayton Albury, um, and you touched on it a little bit in the last pod, Ricky, but you look at Dayton Albury's his stats against UCLA in the NCAA tournament, and granted, Utah State, they just laid an egg. UCLA embarrassed them. Dayton Albury showed up to play. I think he had 12 points and 6 assists and 3 rebounds and 3 steals in 28 minutes. Very effective. He was him and Mason Falslev were pretty much the only production that Utah State had. I know we beat UCLA last year. I'm trying to throw that out there to remind everyone how good our team was. But it's not a transfer up. It's not a transfer down. It's a lateral transfer. And I think this was a big get for Olin because this guy's familiar with the league. I know the change is constant in college basketball. However, he's familiar with the venues. He's familiar with the travel, and his leadership attributes will kick in a lot of that setting. So I like it. I think he's going to be our starting point guard, and hopefully his defense, his offense, he can prove that he could score. But I'm really looking forward to his defensive prowess.
Yeah, I went back and watched actually Utah State versus UC San Diego, where UC San Diego actually gave Utah State their first loss of the year last year. But for some reason, Albury did not start that game. But when he came in, he scored 8 points in about, a minute and a half. He's able to knock down the three, but really consistent going to the hoop, and I think a good finisher. I think his experience also playing for the Bahamas national team,
Yep.
that plays out, spending time with Buddy Hield on that team. DeAndre Ayton. There's a lot of NBA players playing on that Bahama team. And even though he might not have played in the last qualifying where he was part of that team, just seeing that work and being around those guys goes a long way. And when you talk about a lateral transfer, I think that's big. When you look at some of the guys that have had success in the Mountain West as of late, they're guys that were in the league 2 to 3 years. You look at a Degenhardt, a Ian Martinez, a Falselev, even Donovan Dent. He wasn't a starter early on, but, he evolved into obviously the best player in the conference. So I think staying within a conference 2 to 3 years, if you're a starter, you're going to evolve hopefully into a great player. I look for his role to be a lot bigger than it was on Utah State, but just looking forward and happy we got this young man and what he will bring. I think leadership is also something we can expect.
Absolutely. I'm glad you touched on the Bahamas team because you're 100% right, Ricky. He's playing with pros on that team. He also played with BJ Edgecombe out of Baylor, and that guy's a top 3 pick in the draft, top 4 pick. So I'm just him getting exposure, playing with that type of talent and level. That anytime you play for your national team on the, I consider FIBA and Team USA. I consider that the highest level of basketball because it's world competition. And so anytime you get to experience that, it translates pretty well to the collegiate level and even the pro level. I'm not saying Dayton Albury is a pro, but he's played with pros, and so that brings a additional aspect to his game that he could leave an imprint at UNM.
Yeah, I agree. That'll go a long way. Second young man we're going to be talking about here that also brings experience was a junior last year for the Bison at North Dakota State, that being Tajavis Miller. He committed via Instagram, I believe Wednesday morning is when I first saw it. He's a 6'4" guard, played 3 years at North Dakota State, is known for, being a scorer, was a Summit League 6th man of the year last season. So obviously, is able to come off the bench and score, was a starter the first 2 years, it looks like, from the game logs I saw. So you got to wonder why he was sent down to the bench. But looks like a guy that can fill it up, Joe. I believe shoots over 35% from 3 on pretty high volume. What should we be looking for in Mr. Miller to bring to this team?
Well, to Javis Miller out of high school, he played at a high school. He's originally from California, Anaheim, California, but he's from Wolford, Texas. It's right outside of Lubbock. Played at Friendship High, and he was a 3-star recruit out of high school. I was actually shocked North Dakota State got him because he was being recruited by the likes of Oklahoma State, Butler, Oklahoma. I believe USC at the time was giving him looks. I think they were offering him as a preferred walk-on. So, I mean, he had exposure out of high school. When he went to North Dakota State, his production increased gradually. I think he's going to come here and provide us tremendous bench production. I think we're looking at him to be in a similar role that he was at North Dakota State. I think Olin is probably envisioning him to be the 6th man. I mean, obviously, we don't know for certain until Olin puts the product out there. But just based off of everything, I'm looking how the roster is being constructed. I think bench production offensively is going to be this guy's strength for us. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you could get a guy come off the bench, give you 7 to 10 points a night, give you 20 to 25 minutes a night, and play halfway decent defense, you're going to have a good team. I'm looking at this guy to be somewhat of this upcoming season, CJ Nolan, a little bit. I definitely think, and this is no knock on Tajavis Miller, CJ Nolan is a much better defender than Tajavis Miller is. And that's not a knock on him. It's just what's been demonstrated in the synergy film and his game tapes and whatnot. But offensively, I think he could put it in the bucket. So I'm excited for him. I'm really happy that he's another California/Texas kid. I wanted to touch on that a little bit, Ricky, because historically, and even in the transfer portal era, historically, if you look at the success of UNM, you've had three states that you can recruit from and plug into this program, and you're going to win. Dave Bliss, he recruited Texas, California, and Arizona, and had a tremendous amount of success. Steve Alford recruited Texas, California, Arizona. Kendall Williams, Drew Gordon, Philip McDonald, Tony Snell, AJ Hardman. That was the California to Texas pipeline, but he also recruited Demetrius Walker from Arizona. Richard Pitino, he was most successful when he had kids from Texas, California, Arizona on his roster. JT Toppin, Donovan Dent, Jalen House, CJ Nolan. So yes, exactly. So I'm glad that Olin is establishing. I mean, regional recruiting is kind of out the window now with the portal, but I think it's undervalued in a lot of sense. And I'm grateful that Tajavis Miller, Uriah Tennant, even Prescott, Arizona, some of these transfers that he's getting from California. So I think he understands that, and I think that's a very underrated thing for New Mexico right now. But I'm high on Tajavis for a bench score.
I think one underrated thing also about him is, yeah, he averaged over 10 points a game, but also averaged over 4.5 rebounds and was his team's leading offensive rebounder at 6'4" guard. So I know we're going to talk about more about like the roster construction, the overall size, but if you have a 6'4" guard averaging almost 5 rebounds a game, it covers up other deficiencies that guys might have rebounding the ball, right? So I think this guy can fill in, like you're saying, not only scoring, but hopefully add some other parts of his game. And one thing Coach Olin was talking about on the radio today on 610 was when they're bringing these guys in and they're talking to them, of course they're talking about their strengths and how they can maximize those strengths, but they're also talking about their weaknesses and say, hey, you don't do this so well. We don't want you to do that, in our new system here, or do less of that, or we're going to put you in a position so you do less of that, right? So, I think understanding how these guys fit, this guy obviously brings a lot of different elements. He might not be the best, defender by the numbers, but the combination of him with other guys on the court seems like it could be something, and he brings a lot of game. So I'm looking forward to his addition, and I think he'll be a key piece, like you're saying. But looking over the entire roster that we know of right now, I tried to list it in height here, but we got the big man at JT Rock. I think Antonio Chol is listed at 6'9". I've also seen him at 6'8". Last show you were, saying you could see Chol playing forward, or, we're trying to talk about positions, but I don't know if we're going to know the positions of these guys, or if we can really we'll be able to name them even as we go into the season, right? This positionless basketball seems to be the way Olin is going to go. And he made a lot of comments this morning about liking the Boston Celtics style of play. And that excites me, but also terrifies me because of what's happened to the Boston Celtics in their previous 2 games, right? When you shoot that many points from 3, or that many shots from 3, and they don't go, you're in a tough spot. But when you're looking at, I guess, Joe, the overall, I guess, just size, are you concerned at all about not having what we might consider traditional big men, or is just the way the game is played now, and we'll be able to figure it out, with athleticism, length, and other things?
No, I don't know if I'm necessarily concerned, but I will say, I mean, if you look at the NCAA tournament the past couple of seasons, you need size. And I hate to reference this because I have a fond admiration for that team, but Pitino's team that went up against Clemson in 2024 in the NCAA tournament, tremendously athletic. incredible ball skills for guards, they weren't big at all. And it showed. And Clemson dominated us. And they were big, positionally bigger than us across the board. So you definitely need size. I think skill and athleticism is important. But right now, with JT Rock being 7'1", and Antonio Chol being 6'9", if you look at the film, Patton, he's not a big. He's more of a guard. He's more of a small forward. And again, I know Olin wants to do the positionless basketball. Yeah, we need more bigs. And we need a scorer, a scoring guard. And what's tough about it is I know there's the number of how many transfers there are within the portal. It's a crazy amount, but you listen to Jeff Goodman, you listen to John Rothstein, the quality of players within the portal is right now at this point in time it's very low. So I think we're going to have to go the European route. I keep stressing this. I'm not trying to sound like a broken jukebox, but the European route for some bigs, and we are going to have to try to find a proven, or maybe not even proven, but someone who you can look on film has some scoring ability to themselves. Because I think we're missing a scorer on the wing, and I think we're missing a couple bigs right now. I think Olin and the staff have the plan in place. Again, with the roster, you look at it, it's a bit underwhelming because you see a lot of guys transferring up. I live out here in Ohio, and so I'm in the tri-state area, and I used to listen to a lot of Bob Huggins' radio show. And Bob Huggins used to say, with guys transferring up, it's a lot of the times it's fool's gold. And I think maybe we need to look at some guys possibly transferring down, and guys. And what I mean by transferring down from a power forward to us, what I mean by transferring up is from the one bid league, low mid majors coming to us. I mean, no, I'm not saying those guys can't play, but historically, it's proven to be a bit more challenging if you're just getting guys that come straight transferring up. So we need more bigs, and we need a scoring guard, and that's where I stand on the roster. Other than that, though, I definitely think we have some pieces. I'm high on Kevin Patton. I think Kevin Patton at San Diego was unbelievable as a freshman. He was totally misused, and he was used as an insurance piece at USC. But I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table at UNM. And I like where we're at right now. I don't necessarily know if we have our starters yet, but yeah, we definitely need some bigs. Sorry, so long-winded, but I want to stretch that point. I want to stretch the point of the need for bigs that we have.
Yeah, and I think, when Joe is talking about transferring up, he's talking about JUCO, D2 players from lower conferences that are, the Mountain West is a step above. And, Evan Miya came out with some fantastic data today where he focused in on the mid-major teams, the teams of the Mountain West conference size. And these were the three keys that he found over the NIL era to be important for teams to have a success or to win in the NCAA tournament. Well, key number one, the Lobos have no chance of, and that is retain key talent as much as possible. But if you look at it another way, you could say they're really retaining Chris Howe from UC San Diego, along with their coaching staff, and Milos Vicentic, who was on the team. So you could kind of say they're retaining two players possibly from, their old team. The second point that Evan Miya made was, looking for down transfers from higher levels. And what that means is the Big Tens, the Big 12, SEC schools, kids like JT Rock that haven't had an opportunity, want some playing time, a chance to actually make some money possibly, coming down to a Mountain West, coming down to a WAC or a West Coast conference, so they can show what they can do there. So in this case, I would say we got JT Rock, Kevin Patton. We'll consider a transfer down. We'll consider Chol a transfer down, I guess, then a transfer up since he went from Rutgers to junior college in Garden City. But the third point in this data study was limit the resilience on the reliance on the freshmen, and that just means obviously counting a lot on freshmen for teams of this size. You're not going to usually have a lot of high level freshmen because they've gone to the Power Four schools. So Lobos are really facing an uphill battle if they're following what the data is showing here. I know they only have 2 freshmen on the team, and I don't really expect, at this point them to get much burn. They could, who knows? But we're not retaining anything, and we don't have many down transfers, so it's kind of a tough spot. But I guess once we kind of get through signing 4 more players here, I'm just thinking about all of this talk and meetings they've had with the players and the role that they've talked about. All these guys are coming because they want a bigger role, right?
Yeah.
That's a tough position when you got 15 guys that all came here for more, maybe not the freshmen. They might be understanding that they're not good, but all these other 12 guys are coming here because they want to play. It's either their senior year or they're transferring down a level and they expect to start. So I think for Olin and Steph, it's crucial for defining those roles, but those roles might not be carved out to January or February. And he mentioned that on the radio today. The team we see in November is going to be a lot different, from the team we see in conference play. But I think it's just the challenge of the staff of figuring out the roles of these guys and also the players accepting the roles that they're given in the system. So, I think Olin is recruiting a different type of player. And he mentioned, recruiting at UC San Diego is another ballgame because of the harsh academic restrictions that they have. So, he wasn't able to touch probably half the players that he wanted to go after at that school. Where at UNM, I think I got accepted to UNM when I was in 8th grade. They'll let anyone there. So, I mean, that's a lower barrier to entry, right, to get recruited by Coach Olin. But I guess once this roster fills out, Joe, even though we might not see it as one of the stronger ones, just what do you see as the biggest challenges of a totally new team where guys don't know how to, they've never played together?
Yeah, so I listened to Olin's talk with the Santa Fe New Mexican with Will Weber. He was on his podcast a couple days ago, and he actually addressed this. Olin was essentially like, there's pros and cons to it. The pros is that you get to evaluate and pick the kids that actually will fit what you are trying to do schematically. And he said the other pro is, guys may be undervalued within the portal at other programs, but we see their value within what we're trying to do schematically, defensively, offensively, and we see their value, and we appreciate that value. So he kind of made it sound like those were the 2 pros. The cons obviously were, and he said this, and he was like, some days you feel good about it, some days you don't. The cons obviously is that stability part. And I think you touching on Evan Miya's data, I think Olin's aware of that. I think he, I honestly think he's a fairly sharp mind. And I think he's a very analytical mind. And I think he reads a lot of this stuff. And because that was one of the comments he made to Will Weber and the Barone guy at the Santa Fe New Mexican was, the stability of not having anyone on the roster, of not being able to say, hey, this is how we do things. Hey, this is what to expect when you're a freshman, or what to expect from coach. He said that's a very difficult spot to be in. And he obviously said, he acknowledged this is the new era we're in. However, he said you would still like to find some feasibility in terms of stability and consistency. So that when you were sharing the Evan Miya data with me, Ricky, it was spot on the money, and it makes sense because if you look at Patino, and again, I'm not trying to harp on Richard Patino, but I think Richard Patino did a masterfully job recruiting and attacking this portal because they did not rely on freshmen heavily in his 4 years here. I mean, they just didn't. They relied on JT Toppin, but JT Toppin was 1 in a million, 1 in 4 million now at Texas Tech. So, but yeah, it's that Evan Miya data is so spot on the money because if you look at last year, UNM they had Cade Dotson and Milicevic, and both those guys could play. They were highly ranked out of high school.
Right.
However, I think Dotson was reduced to like 7 minutes a game, and Milicevic, he was coming on late, but he was still only playing like 11, 12 minutes a game. So that is something to monitor because and again, I'm not trying to be negative, but I think you're correct in your assumption that these freshmen that we have coming in, I don't know if they can contribute at this level at this time yet in their career. Again, what do I know? I mean, we can only see what we see on film, and I will say this: it's again when you look at this roster, it's a bit underwhelming. But when you hear Olin speak, and when you hear his assistant coach Tankalewicz, or I don't know how you pronounce it exactly, but these guys sound very confident in their methods and their approach to recruiting. So as a fan and as someone from the outside looking in, you hear these guys speak, you're like, wow, these guys know what they're doing. I hope that's the case. I think in the NIL era, I think you have 2 years. Your first year may be a bogey, but your second year, you better get to that tournament. And if not, I think you're in a tough spot. So I look at this maybe as an experimental roster. Also with our NIL, I have expectations of making a run at it, but we'll see what Olin can do with this initial roster. He's not done yet. He has 4 more scholarships, so I'm interested to see how he fills the rest out.
As am I. I think navigating this type of NIL. I mean, he might have navigated NIL waters before, but on this level, with the amount of money, building that relationship with Kurt Roth and Mackenzie at 505 and all those, I think that takes time to have that communication with the staff because, we have to remember the NIL foundation is still not part of the athletic department, right? So there's constant back and forth checking of funds and budgeting and making sure they're all on the same page before any of these deals can get done. So it's a very difficult process. You got to hope that filling out the staff now, is going to help. I think on that Santa Fe, New Mexican interview, they asked him, or maybe it was this morning on 610, but they asked him if he's going to have a NIL manager or a manager. And it didn't sound like at this time, they're going to do it. They're kind of splitting responsibilities amongst the staff, but it'll be very interesting. It's going to be totally different style of play. I think it'll be harder to defend actually for opposing teams because you can only run the pick and roll so many times as we saw before the defense knows what's coming. Everything's in front of you and you can eventually shut it down. And Dent was obviously able to overcome most of those defenses because he's one of the greatest, point guards in school and conference history. But I wouldn't expect a lot of traditional pick and roll to be run with Dayton Albury, if any. Not that he's not able to, but this is going to be, a whole different world here, and I'm looking forward to it and seeing what it's all about. I know, Joe, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything you wanted to mention just about last year's UCSD team under Coach Olin regarding, their climb in the Ken Palm rankings and the Torvik? Did you have anything on that?
Yeah, so you do your research on UCSD during their 5 years of Division I. I will say this: defensively, they've improved each year under Olin. I think in 2024, their defensive efficiency rating was like in the 280s, and last year it was in the top 60. And so I think, or it was out just right outside the top 60. So defensively, I think they're a bit underrated. Now, the reason why I want to bring up the Kempom stuff and the Torvik stuff is because there's some interesting stats that I want Lobo fans to expect. Because us as New Mexicans, we like a specific style of play. I thought, but ultimately we love winning. That's the ultimate thing. As Lobo fans, we love to win. When I was a kid growing up, I used to remember hearing a lot of local radio saying that Bliss's style, Dave Bliss style, was methodical and it was predictable, and maybe that's why we didn't make as deep as runs as we did when he was the coach, because the talent was there. Kenny Thomas, Clayton Shields, Charles Smith, Lamont Long, Kahari Jackson. I mean, there was some talent at UNM under Bliss. I knew growing up. I remember rumblings of fan frustration because of the style of play. Back then, Kempom wasn't around, so we couldn't do the predictive metrics or even look at the analytical piece of it. Alford was a bit more methodical as well in his approach, but Alford, historically, Kempom, when he was at UNM, Alford was elite. His teams were elite defensively. Offensively, they were 80s to 100, but what made Alford's teams at UNM were how elite defensively they were. I think they were top 20 all 6 years he was here defensively. So Richard Pitino was a match made in heaven for me aesthetically as a Lobo fan, because Richard Pitino had us top 5 every year in offensive tempo and offensive efficiency. We were always in the 25 to 70 range. His last 2 years is when the defense dramatically improved. So his defense, I think, with House and them was in the Kempom rankings. It was like in the top 30, and this year it was actually high. It was in the 20s. I bring up Eric Olin and UC San Diego because offensively, the tempo rate, it's in the low 200s consistently. It's 261 this past year, or in the 260s this past year, 280s the year before. It's an efficient way to play basketball, and I compare it to that of Boise State and Colorado State. Colorado State and Boise State had comparative metrics to that of UC San Diego offensively. Where I am impressed, and I found this on Bart Tovik, and I did the comparison on Kempom, where I am impressed. The offense is extremely efficient because it is top 5 year in, year out with Eric Olin and UC San Diego on his turnover rate offensively. They're in the top 5 every year. That means they don't turn over the basketball. If you're going to win in college basketball or at any level, you minimize turnovers. The thing I am also impressed with Eric Olin, defensively, the past 2 years, they were in the top 10 on turnover pressure within Bart Torvik and Kempom. So they cause turnovers and they don't turn over the basketball. The tempo, offensive tempo, is going to be very difficult for people who like to get up and down. I'm not saying this team can't, or his teams can't do that, but what I'm saying is if you watch the Michigan game, it was like a slow burn, Ricky. They started off slow, but they wore out Michigan with their offensive efficiency, and Michigan got caught up and they got bored of playing against that style, and UC San Diego almost beat them because of Michigan's boredom. So it's going to be a totally different style than what we are used to seeing and what we are accustomed to as UNM Lobo fans. And I say the proverbial we because every UNM fan I know likes to get up and down. This team is not going to do that. Now he's recruited athletes that gives us the perception, hey, they will get up and down with Kevin Patton, Dayton Albury, Chol, and JT Rock. And also the Howell kid is an excellent defensive player. But historically, if you look at Olin's teams, again, the rim protection is not there, and the tempo is definitely a dramatic shift from what we experienced with Patino.
Yeah, and I could even see it when I was watching the UCSD versus Utah State game again. I mean, they do change from a zone defense back to a man. One thing he was talking about today, since they have, a lot of players along the same size out there, it just creates a lot of switchability. And when you're switching everything, it's not something, that the other team is usually used to seeing a lot. So when you're always used to doing something a certain way and you become an expert at it, but then you're playing teams that aren't usually used to seeing that type of basketball, that becomes a strength. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Joe. It's kind of a slow burn. It looks like, where it's like death by a million cuts or whatever that metaphor is, but it's going to be a different style of watch, for sure, especially what based on what we've seen the past couple of years. But I think it can be effective. And I know, we're mentioning, this class might look a little underwhelming when you're looking at the rest of the conference. Colorado State, you got to remember, they have a new staff, they have a brand new team. UNLV, brand new staff, brand new team. Yet for some reason their transfers are getting rated a lot higher, or whatever it is, and that'll all play out down the road. But I just think there's still a lot of unknowns in the conference. And as this team shapes out, I think it's all going to come down to if that style that we're talking about now is going to blend with the bodies that he's brought on this roster, and if they accept, playing that style of basketball. So I'm really looking forward to it, Joe. Thank you for breaking that all down for us here. And I will catch up with you next time. It looks like you might have got frozen, so I'm going to drop Joe off for the moment. We're going to be looking forward to fill out the final 4 roster spots of the Lobos here. Coach Olin and staff completing their journey around the country, or however they do it on Zoom. So I want to thank everyone just for joining the show thus far and continuing to listen. Go ahead and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. I know Joe is the reason you're watching in the show, and I really appreciate him coming on the last few weeks with the knowledge. But we will catch you guys around on the next one. And this has been the Cherry Heat Check. Thank you again.